So today, we have a video to start off our sermon series. So let's run that right now.
I'd say just be positive and be confident.
So my best life advice is to take care of yourself. That includes your walk with Christ, your overall health, exercise, mental state, all of that stuff, because through that, once you've taken care of yourself, you can help and take care of other people.
Every time I start to worry about finances or food, I just get reminded, do not worry. And that's always worked for us, so we never have to worry about finances. Praise the Lord.
Always pray every day.
Pray with your spouse before you go to bed, and then you'll never go to bed angry.
Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and that everything falls into place after that.
Okay, so you might have recognized some of those people. That was some of their best advice for life. Let's see if we can get this thing working. There we go. And so we are talking about wisdom to live your life wisely as far as life-work balance in the next few weeks here. And today, I want to talk about rest and the importance of rest. So if you have questions during the talk today, don't hesitate to text them to me. The number will be on the screen, and I'll try to respond to those either at the end of the message or this coming week on Facebook. So this past summer, our youngest son, Josh, has been telling us for a little while that we needed to fix the deck because he said somebody's going to go through the deck. And sure enough, this at the beginning of the summer, he went through the deck. And so I, as a good, responsible father, decided, okay, I guess it's time to fix the deck. So when we got back from a little bit of a vacation, I started tearing the boards on the deck up. And as those of you that have worked with decks probably know, when you start tearing the deck boards up, you realize there's more rot under the deck boards. And so I ended up tearing the whole deck completely apart. Well, after I had taken it apart, I thought, if I'm basically going to build a brand new deck anyway, maybe I should make some changes. And so I decided to build a two-tiered deck and change the shape of it a little bit and so on and so forth. Well, as a result of that, I had to pour some more pilings for this bigger deck and this new lower deck and so on. So I had to dig 4-foot deep holes to put the sonotube in for piling. Now, normally, if you were a bright human being, you would rent an auger to do that. But I don't fall into that category, and so I decided to dig those holes by myself, by hand. Now, folks, I don't know if you've dug a 4-foot deep hole straight down in clay by yourself before, but that is not easy work. And it was warm when I was doing this as well. Now, just so you're, not freaking out here, I did keep my shirt on because I didn't want the neighbors swooning over my amazing dad bod. But there I was, digging these 4-foot deep holes in our backyard. At one point, I was literally laying on my back on the grass, panting, wondering if I was ever going to be able to get up again. But I made it. I got the holes dug, and I told this to somebody, and he says, "You have 2 young sons. Like, what were they doing?" Yeah, I wish I knew what they were doing. But anyway, there I was doing this. Well, the next morning when I got up out of bed, I could barely move my shoulders and my neck and my arms. They were absolutely aching for days. Now, I have understood from my physiology class that it's actually good for your muscles to work hard, but it's during the rest time that they actually rebuild stronger. When you're working hard with your muscles are actually breaking down, and then when you rest, they build back stronger. And so I was strengthening myself, not when I was pushing myself to dig the actual holes. I actually was strengthening when I rested. And today I want to talk a little bit about rest. Now, let's be honest, our white coat work culture here, especially with all the shift work and things like that, is not really geared to be very conducive for good rest for our physical bodies. I tip my hat to any of you that work shift work, where you're going from day shift to evenings to nights and all of those different things. It is crazy how hard that is on your body. And today, I just want to explore a little bit of what we can do to maximize the benefits of rest and how we can incorporate it into our lives in healthy ways. So, we're going to go to God's owner's manual for life. And we are going to look at Mark chapter 2, verses 23 to 28. So, there it says, one Saturday, on the day of rest, Jesus and his disciples were walking through a field of wheat. The disciples were hungry, and so they plucked off some heads of grain to eat. How many of you ever done that? Yeah, it's kind of fun. I used to do that when I was a kid as well. But when some of the Pharisees saw what was happening, they said to him, "Look, your disciples shouldn't be harvesting grain on the Sabbath." And Jesus responded, "Haven't you ever read what King David and his men did when they were hungry? They entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the sacred bread of God's presence. They violated the law by eating bread that only the priests were allowed to eat. But there is one here who is even greater than the temple." Then he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for the sake of people, and not people for the Sabbath. For this reason, the Son of Man exercises his lordship over the Sabbath." So, this is a fascinating story that doesn't really make a lot of sense to us 2,000 years later in a completely different culture. So let me just give you a little bit of the backstory here so you can understand where this is, or why this is significant, and why this was going on. So as Christians, we share the Bible, the first 2/3 of our Bible, with the Jews. It's called the Old Testament. So that's what the Jewish people that were surrounding Jesus lived by. And as Christians, we live by the New Testament, the last 1/3 of the Bible, but we include the Old Testament because there's lots of good, solid background information for the New Testament there that makes the New Testament more meaningful. But basically, the Jews live by the Old Testament, the Christians live by the New Testament, and so that makes our worldview considerably different from the Jewish mindset. So you just need to be aware of that right up front. That's one of the big differences. But one of the things that the the Jews have in their Bible, and we embrace this as Christians as well, is that God created everything. He created the world and he created mankind. And the interesting thing is that the very first day after man was created, so in the creation story, in the first 3 chapters of Genesis, mankind was created on the 6th day, and then God called the 7th day the day of rest. And rest is what Sabbath means. It means to cease from labor or to rest. So when Jesus is talking about the Sabbath, that's just the Jewish word for the day of rest. And so God called the Sabbath on the very first day that mankind was alive. And then he said, now I want you to have this as a regular rhythm. To every 7th day should be a day of rest. And later he gave them the Mosaic law, or the law through Moses, where he actually stipulated the 7th day should be the day of rest. Then Jewish leaders came along later and added extra rules on top of the law that God had given, so that there was all kinds of different rules about how you had to rest, what you were allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And so they had this down to a fine art. You were allowed to walk a certain number of steps. After that, it was considered work. You were allowed to do this, but not that. And so they were basically trying to nail Jesus on one of these extra rules that the Jewish leaders had created. And so basically what they were doing is defining what his disciples were doing. You know, they were taking some wheat in their hands and rubbing it like this, and then they were chewing on it while they walked and saying, that's harvesting wheat. So you are working, you cannot be doing that. And so Jesus does something fascinating here. He brings up David, King David, who was one of the, and still is, one of the most beloved historical figures in the history of Israel. So much so that to this day, the Star of David is at the center of the Israeli flag. So this star is called the Star of David. So that's what a revered position he has in their history. But here's the thing. David was not a stickler at following the rules. And so Jesus points out that he actually broke some rules too, some rules that were even more serious than the one that they were accusing his disciples of breaking right then and there. And you can just imagine their heads exploding as Jesus is talking to them about this, because you can't reconcile the way David was acting with the way they were demanding that people act with all the rules they had added over the years. So David, he had embraced what is actually a very Christian mindset. He had embraced this mindset that love is the most important thing. And I'm just here to love God and to love people, not here to follow a whole bunch of different rules. And so he basically just modified the rules as he went. And he became, in a sense, a very good example for Christians later on, which is one of the reasons why the Old Testament is included in the Christian Bible. Because David, the New Testament actually talks about him as a man after God's own heart. And that's one of the reasons why loving people, is one of the things that we do around here. It's priority for us to love people and love God. And so Jesus is basically, in a very kind of loving and smart way, backing these leaders into a corner. They don't really have a way of countering what he's doing. And the truth is, Jesus had lots of these kinds of confrontations with the Jewish leaders about the Sabbath. They were constantly after him. Oh, you broke the rules again. Oh, you broke the rules again. And Jesus was calling the people back to the original meaning of what God meant with the day of rest, which was to rest, not to be picking on each other for not following the rules, not to make the day of rest a stress day where you're always scared of, making a mistake because you're going to violate the rules. Basically, Jesus came to tell us God is not a big killjoy. God is here to help you live well. That's one of the reasons why we say around here, we are a place where families thrive, because that's what God is all about. He's about us thriving. And Jesus came to basically correct all of the misunderstandings that had accumulated up until that point about who God was. Jesus basically came and threw out all of the Old Testament law and said, okay, that's done now. Now we're going to live by the love of God, by grace. We're going to be saved through faith and not through all of these rule-following activities. And beloved, that's why Jesus is the only way for me. If you look at any other religion in the world, it's all about a bunch of rules. But Jesus is about love. Jesus is about walking out what it means to truly love other people. And that's what I love about Jesus. That's why I want to follow him and him alone. So the key thing here with finding rest in a healthy way is balance. We need to walk in a balanced way or live in a balanced way. How many of you would like to try that? Yeah, balance is the key. Now, the truth is, many of us grew up with parents that were not living balanced lives. Some of them were alcoholics, and they, barely could keep their lives together. Others were workaholics, and they, were always working. Others had other issues. The interesting thing to me is it seems like in our culture today, there's a little bit of a generational shift going on. Like if you talk to my parents and my grandparents in particular, they were very, very work-focused, and rest was sort of a non-issue. But if you talk to my kids and their generation, rest and recreation and work-life balance seems to be a much higher value. And so you've got these two generations that kind of are throwing pot shots at each other. The older ones are going, oh, these lazy young people, just sitting around playing video games or whatever. And then you've got the younger ones going, all you do is work all the time. You don't even enjoy life, and you don't even know how to really live life. And so they're both criticizing each other, and in workplaces you see this even more. The older ones that are hard workers are like, oh, these young bucks, always looking for a break or whatever. And the young ones are like, well, I'm not living like them. And the truth is, extremes are unhealthy in both directions. To work all the time is not healthy. To not work enough is not healthy. Finding that middle ground is where health is. And I think that's one of the important things that we need to recognize. So we need to have balance at a number of different levels. I think we need daily balance. So in a 24-hour period, you need to have a rest time. And most scientists would say that 8 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period is ideal. So we need to have work and we need to have rest in our 24-hour cycle. Then in a weekly cycle, we come back to this idea that God initiated. We need to have 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. That day of rest is very important in order for us to have a healthy balance. Then on a monthly cycle, it's important to have probably one weekend where you take a break and just breathe deep and relax and enjoy your weekend. And then on a yearly basis, I think it's important to have a few weeks where we have some time to just relax and slow down. We see this in the way God prescribed for the Jews in the Old Testament to have several feasts during the year. There's 3 of them in the spring and 3 of them in the fall, where they would rest from all their work and they would be rejuvenated, often for a whole week. And so God is calling us to find a rhythm that is healthy for us. Now, I would be curious to find out what in your life, because it looks a little different in everybody's life, is the most important part of your rhythm of regular rest. So if you're online or you're sitting here today, text me. Text me the key thing that really does it for you, the thing that rejuvenates you, thing that is helpful in your rest rhythm. I would say one of the things that's very important with this rest thing is not to make the mistake that these Jewish leaders did, and that's to set up a whole bunch of rules around it. No, well, I'll do this, but I won't do that, or whatever, unless you need those rules for your own sake. But very important that you don't impose those on others. I know I'm old. Maybe this would be completely irrelevant to you guys, but I actually grew up in an era when they still had rules about Sundays. It was the Lord's Day. And you are not allowed to do a whole bunch of things. You know, you are not allowed to play sports on Sundays. You are not allowed to do any kind of yard work or anything like that. And stores were not open on Sundays. You definitely were not allowed to do, any kind of shopping or anything like that on Sundays. And quite frankly, it was one of the most boring days of the week because you weren't allowed to do anything. And I grew up feeling like, okay, let's just get this over with so we can get on to some fun stuff. And my family wasn't nearly as bad as some families. Maybe your family was way more that way. So I encourage you, don't set hard and fast rules for yourself. That defeats the whole purpose of genuinely resting, because it becomes awkward and more kind of difficult when you do that. Now, there's 2 levels of rest that I think are important for us to grapple with. The first one is physical rest, and that's the most easy one to kind of understand and measure and so on and so forth. Now, the truth is that during COVID, we have probably, if we're really honest, had more physical rest than what we really need or want. Now, I know I'm extremely buff and you guys are just awed at my physique, but I'll shock you by saying I've actually gained 11 pounds during COVID. I call it my COVID fat. And that is because I have enjoyed eating a little more than I should have, and I've been a little less active than what I should have been. And the combination is, probably not totally untypical for us. But the second level of rest is actually probably just as important, maybe even more important, and that's emotional rest. Emotional rest is when we slow down enough to actually feel our emotions. In our culture, we often live at such a neck-break pace that we don't actually feel our emotions, especially the more difficult emotions. Now notice here, I did not call them bad emotions. I said more difficult or challenging emotions. And by that I mean emotions like fear or anger or sadness. We tend to want to cover over those emotions in our culture. We don't like it when people show or feel strong emotions in those three areas. And there's more as well. The problem is when you shut down those emotions and you don't allow yourself to feel those particular more difficult emotions, they almost form like a lid over some of the more pleasant emotions that we like to feel, like joy and peace and love. And so we end up crippling the good part of ourselves that we want to enjoy by not giving ourselves space to process some of these more challenging emotions. And often the way we do that is by simply not opening the door for that kind of emotional rest. And so we live in this sense of fear of those emotions, and because we're scared of them, we react in one of two ways. Fear, you maybe have heard the term fight or flight. So flight is a way in which people respond in fear. So that's sort of the cowering kind of thing. So there are people that are so scared of their emotions, those difficult emotions in particular, that they cower away from doing anything that might jeopardize their emotional equilibrium or, cause those emotions to come to the surface. And so these are the people that busy themselves with stuff that's really not that important. So, they might just live a life that's very, very focused around a few little activities that really aren't that big in the big picture of things in order to stay away from those more difficult emotions. And then there's the flight or the fight side of fear, and those are people who are constantly driving themselves super hard to go, 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 go all the time. And those are the people that tend towards maybe workaholism, but now it's not necessarily just workaholism. It can be just filling up your schedule with all kinds of activities, sports or kids' activities or this or that or the other thing, so that you're running all the time so that you don't have time to feel those emotions that are there. And it can actually become like an addiction, like an adrenaline addiction. So you're just go, 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 go all the time to stay ahead of that emotion. So I'm going to read a couple of quotes here by a guy named Eugene Peterson. Eugene Peterson is the guy that made the Message translation of the Bible. He was also a pastor for many, many years. And here is what he says. And this just really kind of rocked me when I read this. He said, "I am busy because I'm lazy. I let others decide what I will do instead of resolutely deciding myself." So basically he's saying, I've surrendered my life to the madness around me so that I don't have to take initiative to live a healthy life myself. So basically, I can just blame my life on everybody else. And he calls that laziness. So he's saying that people who are super busy because they're lazy. Interesting. Well, here's the next thing he says. I am busy because I'm vain. I want to appear important. What better way than to be busy? The incredible hours, the crowded schedule, the heavy demands of my time are proof to myself and all who will notice that I am important. Whoa. Eugene, that's... Now you're meddling where angels fear to tread. The truth is, the next step of growth for all of us starts with getting real with ourselves. We have to be honest about what our motives are. We need to ask ourselves, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I living like this? So here, I hereby give you permission, if you are a parent, to not have your child signed up in everything they want to be involved in. So you have my permission to say no to them. Our culture teaches us you shouldn't say no to them because then you might hurt them. I am saying no, you have permission to say no. You have permission to live a balanced life, to be healthy. If you live a healthy balance, your children will also more likely have a healthy balance. If you are living your life at a neck breaks pace, I hereby give you permission to slow down, to be able to feel again. Even if the emotions you feel are hard, you have my permission to rest emotionally, process those emotions so that you can become healthy and so that you can walk in a healthier balance in the emotional realm of your life. And here's the thing I want you to remember. If you're scared of what you might find under the hood of your life, Jesus is there with you. You can process your emotions with him. I do that on a regular basis. It's a healthy, beautiful thing. And if you read the Psalms, you see David did the same thing. He was mad sometimes. What did he do? He processed that with God. He was sad sometimes. A huge chunk of the Psalms are laments where David is devastated, and he processed his sorrow with God. And the same thing, if you're anxious or whatever's going on in your life, process it with God. And the Psalms can be a beautiful way to kind of trigger some of those feelings inside of you and help you voice them to God. And if you need somebody that you can actually physically see and touch, come and talk to me or to Pastor Johan. We'd be happy to work with you through some of those emotions that might be under the surface that are difficult. And because we want you to live in a thriving kind of way. And that will help you thrive. I guarantee when you walk with Jesus at that deeper level inside, he will bring you to a place of thriving. So I have a friend of a friend, and he was a young guy, married, beautiful young woman, and somewhere along the way, he got it in his head that she wanted him to be wealthy or wanted them to be wealthy. And so he drove himself to make money and to get all the things that he imagined that she wanted. And so he was actually a millionaire by the time he turned 30. Incredibly successful. And then his wife left him. And he was absolutely blown right out of the water. And when he sat down with her and tried to talk about this, he was like, what on earth? I mean, I was doing all of this for us, for you. This is what I thought you wanted. And she explained to him, no, that's not what I wanted. I never said that's what I wanted. I wanted you. I wanted us to be able to go for walks together. I wanted us to be able to have quality time together on the deck. I wanted us to have a life together, not just stuff together. And the interesting thing was, somewhere along the way, he had heard something different than what she was trying to say. And he still was not hearing what she was saying. He was just confused because he felt like she was sending mixed signals. And as he began to process this with a counselor afterward, he began to realize that his own motives for getting wealthy was what was driving him, not his wife's motives. He was filled with insecurities that made him assume this is what she wanted, hear that in her words, or interpret what she was saying in those ways, and so he drove himself because of his own insecurities, not because of her. And I've since lost touch with them, so I don't know if they were ever able to reconcile or not. But one thing I know is when you don't understand what's going on inside of you, you can easily end up way out of balance and not recognize it and not recognize how you got there. And so it's so important for all of us to take the time to genuinely rest so that Jesus can help us figure out where our life is going and how to aim it in the right direction. So I don't know where you're at with Jesus, but I think it's pretty clear that I'm a strong believer in Jesus' ability to help us thrive. And no matter where you're at with Jesus, you can actually improve that relationship. Let's see if this will help. It's a miracle. And so I would like to invite you, no matter where you're at with Jesus, to make a deeper commitment to him today. If you've been walking with Jesus for many, many years, I invite you to say, Jesus, I want to give you more control over my life. If you're brand new on this journey with Jesus, maybe you have never even invited him into your life at all, today's a perfect day to start. So I invite you to take that step today and say yes to Jesus. And if you are in a position where you recognize yourself in some of what we've been talking about today, I'd like you to ask Jesus to help you find a place of rest, whether it's physical rest or emotional rest or both, this coming week. It's easy to sit here and go, yeah, I need to do this. I'll get to that once I'm not so busy. Folks, it doesn't work that way. That time will never come. You might be less busy physically, but then you'll have more other things going on in your life, and you'll forget about this. And so I would like you to take a moment right now and say, okay, I'm going to make a decision for when I'm going to rest this week. Rest physically and emotionally. Let's pray. Dear Jesus, I thank you that when you came, it wasn't just to be a nice guy. You came because you had the key to living life well. And now you're opening the door for us to receive that key. And so, Jesus, I'm saying to you from my heart, I want you to show me more and more clearly how to truly thrive in life. I'm going to walk to the best of my ability in the pathway that you are showing me to walk. And specifically, Lord Jesus, I pray that you would help me be able to rest this week. Show me a specific time and place and process for resting that I can wrap my heart around, wrap my mind around, and put into my schedule for this coming week. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.